Good evening. I need a room for tonight. I'm afraid we're fully committed this evening, sir. The app shows availability. The app isn't always current. Our system shows full occupancy as of an hour ago. Can you check again? A pause. The kind that lasts longer than a check requires. I've checked. I'm sorry I can't help you tonight. There are several properties in the area that may have. I'm not asking for a referral. I'm asking you to look at the screen. Sir, the voice dropped half a register, pitched for the lobby's edges without losing its surface courtesy. I've explained our situation. If you'd like, I can print you a list of nearby. 2 people just walked in behind me. No reservation. They're at the desk now. A breath. The specific breath of someone buying a second. Those guests had a prior arrangement. They came through the door 30 seconds after I did. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to. I'd like to speak with the manager. I am the manager. What nobody in the lobby of Estrella Nob Hill understood yet. Not Drea Solis behind the desk. Not Marco Vidal beside her. Not the night security supervisor already moving from his post toward the entrance, was that the man in the gray windbreaker with the duffel bag and the quiet that would not be moved had written the guest services manual from which Drea Solis had been trained. And that the line about prior arrangements was on page 41, and that he had written it to mean something different from what she had just used it to mean. Before we go deeper into this story, type 777 in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. If stories about quiet dignity and the kind of justice that changes things permanently move you, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You will not want to miss what happens in this lobby before the night is over. Benedicto Estrella grew up in Iloilo City with the particular education of a child who watches his father leave for work before sunrise and return after dark, and understands, without being told, that the leaving and the returning are both forms of love. Tatay Crispin was a bellman. 31 years at the Grand Residencia, the finest hotel in Iloilo in its time. A white colonial building on the esplanade with ceiling fans in the lobby and a dining room that served guests who came from Manila and from abroad and who expected and received the kind of service that made the invisible work of invisible people feel like the natural order of things. Tatay Crispin wore a uniform with brass buttons. He carried bags. He held doors. He called taxis in the rain without an umbrella, because the umbrella was for the guests. He remembered the names of families who came back year after year, remembered the names of their children, remembered how the grandmother took her coffee. He received tips that ranged from generous to nothing, and treated the nothing the same as the generous, because, as he said, you cannot carry a bag differently based on what you expect to find at the end. He said a great many things, Tatay Crispin, in the specific way of fathers, who know they will not have unlimited time to say them, and therefore say them often enough that they become part of the air inside the house. The one he said most often was this: Benny, ang tao na nagdadala ng maleta mo ngayon, baka siya ang magmamay-ari ng hotel bukas. Tratuhin mo ang lahat ng pantay-pantay palagi. The man carrying your bag today might own the hotel tomorrow. Treat everyone the same. Always. Benny had heard this so many times before he understood it, and so many times after that it had stopped being something he thought about and become something he simply was. He did not realize this until he was 22, and a manager at the Grand Residencia snapped at a laundry attendant in front of guests, and Benny felt something move in his chest that was not quite anger and not quite grief, but was made of both. And he understood that what moved was his father's rule responding to its own violation. He left the Philippines at 26 with a hotel management degree, $400, and Tatay Crispin's patience, which was, of all the things his father had given him, the most transferable and the most necessary. He spent 3 years learning housekeeping from the inside, because he had watched his father carry bags for 31 years without anyone asking him what he saw from that angle, and Benny had decided early that he would not make that mistake. He learned front desk from a clerk in Phoenix who had worked the night shift for 20 years and who told him that the night shift was where you found out what a building actually was, because at night, the building stopped performing. He learned floor management in Las Vegas, which taught him that the distance between excellent and ordinary was almost always a systems problem dressed up as a people problem. When Tate Crispin died, quietly in the dry season, in the house in Iloilo that still smelled of brass polish and the specific soap the Grand Residencia had provided its staff, he left Benny a small inheritance, a laminated photograph taken outside the hotel on Tate Crispin's last working day, and a sentence delivered in the particular clarity of a man using his final coherent hours with intention. Benny, huwag mong kalimutan kung saan ka nanggaling. Hindi ka nanggaling sa pera. Nanggaling ka sa mga taong nagdadala ng bag ng ibang tao ng may dignidad. Never forget where you came from. You did not come from money. You came from people who carried other people's bags with dignity. The photograph was taken in the bright afternoon. Tate Crispin, in his brass-buttoned uniform outside the Grand Residencia entrance, squinting slightly in the sun, holding his cap at his side. The expression on his face was the expression Benny had seen his whole childhood, and which he could only name now, from a distance of years. It was the expression of a man who knows exactly what he is worth, and has decided that the world's failure to agree is the world's problem, not his. Benny had the photograph laminated because it was the most important document he owned. He carried it in his jacket pocket. He had placed a framed copy of it in the staff corridor of every Estrella property at opening, on the wall beside the time clock, so that every employee passed it twice each shift. Most had no idea who the man in the uniform was. The staff who had been with the company long enough to ask had been told, that is the reason this company exists. That is what this standard is for. The bank loan that funded the first property had taken 2 years to secure. The meeting where it was finally approved lasted 11 minutes, which was shorter than any of the 46 meetings that had not approved it, and Benny had walked out of the building afterward and stood on the sidewalk in Phoenix and called Iloilo and told his mother. And his mother had said, "Your father knew." And Benny had said, "I know, Nane." And neither of them had said anything else for a while. 23 years later, the Estrella collection comprised 17 boutique hotels across 6 states. Moderate luxury, not the top of the market, not the bottom, but the specific register where a family saving for a trip and an executive on a business stay could both feel that the room was made for them. This had been intentional. It was in the founding document, written on yellow legal pads in 2001, in language that sounded like his father. Every guest at the Estrella collection should feel, from the moment they walked through the door, that someone saw them coming and was glad they arrived. The newest property, Estrella Nob Hill, 90 rooms, San Francisco's Pacific Heights neighborhood, had opened 14 months ago. Benny had attended the opening weekend, had cut the ribbon, had placed the framed photograph in the staff corridor himself. He had not been back since. The quarterly reports were good. The review scores were strong. The revenue was on target. He had received an anonymous note 2 weeks ago, slipped under the door of his Phoenix office on a Wednesday morning. It was handwritten, brief, and unsigned. "Come to Nob Hill. Come as a guest. Come after 10. He had read it twice and set it on his desk and looked at it for a long moment. He had known immediately that it was from someone inside the building. The phrasing, "come as a guest," was the phrasing of someone who understood what his unannounced visits meant and why he made them. Someone who wanted him to see something that the quarterly reports were not showing him. He booked a flight. He told no one. He wore the gray windbreaker he wore for every unannounced visit. Plain, unremarkable, the jacket of a man who might be anything and had not announced what. He carried his duffel. He put the laminated photograph in his jacket pocket. He landed at Sfo at 9:40 and took a rideshare to the hotel, because arriving in a car service was a tell. He pushed through the revolving door of Estrella Nob Hill at 7 minutes past 10. The lobby was his, and it was not his. His in the way that every decision that had shaped it had passed through his hands. The palette, the layout, the specific warmth of the lighting that was supposed to feel like late afternoon regardless of when you arrived. The front desk positioned so that a guest coming through the door would be greeted before they had taken 10 steps. He had spent 3 days on site before the opening making sure the execution matched the intention. Not his in the way that a place becomes not yours when you have not been inside it for 14 months and the people who run it every night have made it into something shaped by their own habits and assumptions rather than yours. He noticed, within 30 seconds, that the entry light on the left side of the desk was dimmer than the right. A bulb fading or a setting drifting. A small thing, the kind of small thing that accumulates. He noticed that the arrangement in the ceramic planter by the entrance had gone past its peak by 2 or 3 days. He noticed that the bellman station near the entrance was empty. He crossed to the front desk. The desk agent, young mid-20s, with the alert competence of someone recently trained, saw him coming and produced a professional smile that was the right shape, but had something behind it that was not quite present. He would think about what that something was later, in the elevator, when there was time. Benny asked for a room. The agent, Marco, his name tag read, typed, looked at the screen. Looked at Benny. Typed again, more briefly, in the way of someone who has already found the answer and is creating the impression of having searched. "I'm afraid we're fully committed this evening, sir." Benny looked at the front desk screen from where he was standing. He could not read the specific numbers, but he could read the column structure, and the column structure did not look like a fully committed hotel. "The app shows availability," he said. What followed was the exchange that would be documented in 3 incident reports, a VP's operational memo, and eventually, after the story found its way out through the particular network that stories find when they are too good to stay contained, a hospitality industry case study used in 3 university programs. The details have been verified. The timestamps are exact. At 10:09 p.m., Marco Vidal told Benny Estrella that the Estrella Nob Hill was fully committed. At that moment, the Estrella Collection's proprietary guest services system showed 22 standard rooms available, 4 junior suites available, and 1 accessible room available. At 10:11 p.m., Drea Solis arrived from the back office. She had the particular energy of someone who has been called to manage a situation that has already been named before she arrived. The name, in this case, being a variation of persistent walk-in, possible trouble. She positioned herself beside Marco with the geometry of authority and told Benny the manager had been consulted, and the situation was not going to change. At 10:13 p.m., a couple came through the revolving door. No reservation. Drea found them a junior suite in 40 seconds. The transaction was smooth and warm and audible to anyone standing within 8 feet of the desk. Benny did not raise his voice. He pointed at the screen. He said, "They came through the door after me." Drea said, "Prior arrangement." He asked her to explain the prior arrangement. She said, "Their account is in the system." He asked from when. She moved on. He asked to see the manager. She said she was the manager. At 10:19 p.m., a family of 3 came through the door. No reservation. Marco found them a standard double with a rollaway in under a minute. Benny watched it happen from 3 feet away. His duffel was on the floor beside him. He had not moved from the spot where he had first stopped at the desk. He had not raised his voice. He had not made any gesture that could be named in an incident report as anything other than standing still and watching. This was the part that was beginning to unsettle Drea Solis, though she would not have said so. She was used to the script playing out. Persistent walk-ins fell into 2 categories: people who argued and could be categorized, and people who left. This man did neither. He stood with his duffel and his gray windbreaker, and a patience that had no bottom she could find. And the longer he stood there, the more the lobby arranged itself around his stillness in a way that was becoming difficult to ignore. She made the decision that people make when they have committed to a position, and the only way forward seems to be committing harder. She called the night security supervisor. She began typing the incident report. She told Dan Aquino, the night bellman who had returned to his station, to move the guest's bag away from the entrance area. Dan Aquino was 23 years old and 3 months into his first hotel job, and he was Filipino, and he had walked past the framed photograph in the staff corridor every shift for 3 months. He did not know who was in the photograph, but he crossed to the duffel, and he picked it up with both hands, and he said, in a voice so quiet only the man in the windbreaker could hear it, "I'm sorry, sir. I was told to move this. I'll keep it right here where you can see it." And he set it down 2 feet away, where Benny could see it, and he straightened up and went back to his station, and he did not look at Drea. Benny noted this. He noted it in the way he noted the older security guard in the reference story his father had told him about the hotels he worked in, with the specific attention reserved for the person who does the smallest possible honest thing in a room where honesty is expensive. He reached into his jacket pocket. He held the laminated photograph for a moment, the way he had held it on the worst nights of the early years, when the bank called, and the reviews were bad, and the plan on the yellow legal pads seemed very far from where he was standing. He thought about Tate Crispin outside the Grand Residencia in the afternoon sun. He thought about 31 years of brass buttons and held doors. He thought about the bags his father had carried for people who had never once asked his name. He thought about the 14 months since the opening and the anonymous note and the sentence "come as a guest," and what it meant that someone inside this building had needed him to see this badly enough to slip a note under his door. He put the photograph back in his pocket. He crossed the lobby to the seating area, a cluster of low chairs and a side table near the window, placed exactly where he had specified in the design brief, and he sat down. He set his duffel beside him. He folded his hands. He waited. Drea Solis watched him sit down from behind the desk. She said something to Marco that caused Marco to stop looking at the armchairs. She finished the incident report. She sent the message in the staff app. She did everything that constituted handling a situation, and the situation declined to be handled, and just sat there in a gray windbreaker being patient at her. In the housekeeping alcove off the east corridor, 15 feet from the front desk, and separated from it by a decorative partition that was more suggestion than wall, Luisa Reyes had been doing what head of housekeeping does at 10:30 on a weekday evening: supply audit, next day linen allocation, the specific administrative quiet of a department that operates mostly while guests sleep. She was 58 years old and had been with the Estrella collection for 9 years, across 3 properties. And she knew this company the way you know a company, when you have worked inside it long enough that you understand the difference between what it says it is and what it actually is in the daily practice of its ordinary hours. She had looked up when the revolving door turned at 10 past 10. She had not moved for a long moment. She had seen Mr. Estrella twice in person, at the San Diego opening, 4 years ago, when he had crouched in the lobby and cleaned a scuff off the baseboard tile with his own handkerchief rather than asking someone to do it, and she had thought, "That is what the owner looks like." And at a staff town hall in Phoenix the following year, where he had spent 40 minutes answering questions from housekeeping staff about the linen replacement cycle and had known the answer to every question, which was not something she had ever seen an owner do before. She had not spoken to him either time. She was not sure he knew she existed. She was sure it was him. She stood in the housekeeping alcove and watched what was happening at the front desk with the specific quality of attention that belongs to people who are watching something wrong happen and are calculating what it costs them to stop it. She saw the couple come through and get the junior suite in 40 seconds. She saw the family come through and get the double in under a minute. She saw Dan move the duffel and say something quiet to the man in the windbreaker that made the man nod once. She saw Drea on her phone. She saw the security supervisor taking his position. She went to the housekeeping station phone. She dialed the 2-digit extension she had memorized 4 months ago when Carmen Reyes, VP of Operations, here for the site review, staying on the 6th floor, had stopped by the housekeeping department to talk about the linen audit and had written her direct extension on a card and said, "Anytime you need me to know something, call." The phone rang twice. "Reyes, Miss Carmen, it's Luisa." From housekeeping, a pause. The pause of someone sitting up in a hotel room at 10:30. "Luisa, what is it?" "He's here," Luisa said. Front desk. A longer pause. "I'm coming down," Carmen said. "Don't let anything happen. I can't stop what's already, I know. I'm coming." Luisa set down the phone. She walked out of the housekeeping alcove and crossed to where Dan Aquino was standing at the Bellman station. She stood beside him and looked at the man in the armchair across the lobby, and she did not look away. Dan looked at her. Then he looked at the man in the armchair. "You know who that is?" he asked, very quietly. "Yes," Luisa said. "Who?" She looked at the young man. 3 months on the job. Filipino, she pointed down the east corridor toward the staff entrance. "There's a photograph on the wall next to the time clock. Has been there since the property opened. Go look at it." Dan looked at her. Then he walked down the corridor. He came back in 90 seconds. He stood beside Luisa, and he did not say anything. His face said enough. They stood there together, the head of housekeeping and the bellman, and watched the lobby and waited for the elevator. At 10:47 p.m., the Estrella Nob Hills night security supervisor, at Drea's instruction, crossed the lobby toward the seating area with the practiced, unhurried movement of someone who has done this before and expects a specific range of outcomes. He stopped 2 feet from the armchair. "Sir, I've been asked to let you know that we need this seating area for arriving guests. If you don't have a reservation with us tonight, I'm going to have to ask you to. I'm waiting," Benny said. "Sir, I haven't raised my voice. I haven't approached the desk in." He checked the time. 26 minutes. "I haven't disrupted any other guest. My bag is there." He indicated the duffel where Dan had set it. "I am sitting in a chair." He looked at the security supervisor with the complete, unhurried attention of a man who has been in far more difficult conversations than this one, and has learned that patience is not the same as passivity. "If you have a specific violation of your guest conduct policy to cite, I would like to hear it. If you don't, I would like to continue waiting." The security supervisor looked at him. He had 20 years in hospitality security, and he had developed, over those 20 years, a reliable sense of which situations were what they appeared to be. This one had stopped appearing to be what he had been told it was somewhere around the 10-minute mark. He took a step back. "I'll need to speak with Miss Solis," he said. "Take your time," Benny said. From his jacket pocket, he took out his phone. He opened the Estrella Collection's owner dashboard, the app he had paid to have built specifically so that no front desk could ever tell him what the screen said without the screen being able to answer for itself. The screen said, Estrella Nob Hill. Current occupancy, 67%. Standard rooms available, 19. Junior suites available, 4. Accessible room available, 1. Since 10:09 p.m., when Marco had told him the hotel was fully committed, the system had logged 4 room assignments. A junior suite at 10:13, a standard double with rollaway at 10:19, a king standard at 10:31, and a standard queen at 10:44. All walk-ins. None with prior reservations in the system at the time of assignment. He took screenshots with the timestamps visible. Then he opened the incident report that Drea had filed at 10:23 p.m. because the owner's dashboard included the live incident log. The report described persistent walk-in, refusal to vacate lobby, possible intoxication, raised voice. He had not raised his voice. He sat in the armchair with his phone in his hand and the dashboard open, and the screenshots filed, and the patience that had been the inheritance, and the only inheritance, from 31 years of brass buttons and held doors. And he waited. The elevator chimed at 10:51 p.m. Carmen Reyes stepped out already moving. 52 years old. 12 years with the Estrella Collection, the specific momentum of a woman who has been briefed on something by phone and has spent the elevator ride calculating the distance between what she was told and what she suspects. She was wearing the clothes she had been in when Luisa called, blazer over a blouse, the jacket of someone who had been working late and had not changed into the hotel robe. She had her lanyard on. She swept the lobby in 2 seconds and found Benny in the armchairs and crossed directly to him without going to the front desk first. Drea Solis watched this happen. Mr. Estrella, Carmen stopped in front of the armchairs. Her voice was level and professional, and underneath the professionalism was something that was not quite embarrassment and not quite fury, but was built from both. I am so sorry, I just heard. She said it in a way that carried. Not shouting, but the lobby at 10:50 on a weeknight was not a loud place, and the words Mr. Estrella and I am so sorry together made a particular sound in a quiet room. Marco Vidal went very still behind the desk. Drea Solis's face performed a rapid series of recalculations that did not resolve into anything useful. Dan Aquino, standing at the Bellman station, looked at Luisa. Luisa looked straight ahead. Benny stood. He was not a tall man. He was 61 years old and slightly built and wearing a gray windbreaker, and when he stood from the armchair he was shorter than both the security supervisor and the night desk manager, and he was the most important person in the room by a margin that had just become visible to everyone in it simultaneously. "Thank you for coming down, Carmen," he said. His voice was the same voice it had been at 10:10, quiet, unhurried, carrying no weight of performance. "I'd like a few minutes with the front desk team before we do anything else." He walked to the desk. Drea Solis was behind the marble. Marco was beside her. The security supervisor had drifted to a position slightly to the left of the desk, which was the position of someone who is no longer certain which side of a situation they should be on. Benny set his phone on the desk. The dashboard was open. "My name is Benedicto Estrella," he said. "I am the founder and owner of the Estrella Collection. This is one of my hotels." He said it the same way he had said everything tonight, without theater, without announcement, as a fact that deserved to be stated clearly, and then moved past. "At 10:09 this evening, I was told this property was fully committed." He turned the phone so the screen faced the desk. The system shows that at 10:09, 19 standard rooms were available. Since then, 4 walk-in parties have been accommodated, none with advance reservations. I've taken screenshots of each assignment with timestamps. He looked at Drea. I've also read the incident report you filed at 10:23. It describes a guest who raised his voice and showed signs of possible intoxication. He let that sit for a moment. The lobby was very quiet. I have been in hotel management for 33 years, Benny said. I know what possible intoxication looks like in a lobby incident report. I know what it is used to mean. He looked at her, not with anger, with the specific clarity of a man who has made peace with what he is seeing and is now deciding what to do about it. I want to ask you something directly, Miss Solis, and I want you to think before you answer. Drea did not speak. When I came through that door tonight, what did you decide about me? Before I said a word, before I asked for a room, in the first 5 seconds, he paused. What did you decide? The lobby held its breath. Drea opened her mouth. She was an intelligent woman, and she had spent 14 months developing a fluency in the language of hospitality management, and she reached for that language now and found for the first time that it would not form itself into anything that fit what was being asked. We had no way of knowing. You're right, Benny said. You had no way of knowing who I was. That is the point. He picked up his phone. He looked at Marco. You had no way of knowing either. He looked at the security supervisor. None of you knew. He looked at the whole desk. And because you didn't know, you showed me exactly what this property does when it thinks it won't be accountable for it. He reached into his jacket pocket. He took out the laminated photograph. He set it on the marble desk. Tate Crispin, outside the Grand Residencia in Iloilo, uniform and brass buttons, cap at his side, the afternoon sun making him squint, the expression on his face that Benny had spent his whole life learning to read correctly. My father's name was Crispin Estrella, Benny said. He was a bellman for 31 years. He held doors for people who never learned his name. He carried bags for guests who did not see him as a person. He told me, more times than I can count, that the man carrying your bag today might own the hotel tomorrow, and that this was why you treated everyone the same, not because it was good strategy, but because it was right. He looked at the photograph for a moment. Then he looked up. There is a framed copy of this photograph on the wall of the staff corridor of every Estrella property. Has been since the first one opened. It is there because I wanted the people who work in my buildings to know where this company came from. To know that it was built by someone who was treated the way you treated me tonight. He picked up the photograph and put it back in his pocket. I did not put it there so that people would recognize me. I put it there so they would understand the standard. He turned to Carmen. The incident report filed tonight needs to be voided and refiled accurately, he said. Every room assignment made after my request was denied needs to be documented with the timestamps from the system, and the discrepancy needs to be in writing. He looked at Drea. Miss Solis, your employment with the Estrella Collection is terminated effective tonight. Carmen will provide you with the formal documentation. He looked at Marco. Marco straightened. You followed her lead, Benny said. That is part of what a 24-year-old does in his first hotel job when the manager sets the direction. It is not an excuse. But it is a difference. He looked at him steadily. You will be on a performance plan. You will complete the full Estrella Guest Services training, not the abbreviated version, the full 8-module program. And you will have a review in 90 days. He paused. That is what the difference looks like in practice. Marco nodded. He looked like a person who had been given something he was not sure he deserved and was going to spend time trying to deserve it. Benny looked at the security supervisor. Your report will reflect that your actions tonight were directed by management. The assessment of your conduct individually will come from the review. He looked at the lobby. Dan at the bellman station. Louisa at the edge of the housekeeping alcove. The two guests in the bar who had stopped pretending to be elsewhere. Dan, he said. Dan Aquino stood straight. You were told to move my bag away from the entrance. You moved it 2 feet and told me you were keeping it where I could see it. Benny looked at the young man. That was the only completely honest thing that happened at this desk tonight. I noticed it. Dan nodded. He looked at his shoes and then back at Benny and did not say anything because there was nothing to say that would not diminish the moment. Benny turned to the wall near the staff corridor entrance. From where he was standing, if you knew to look, you could just see the edge of the framed photograph. He crossed to it. He stood in front of it for a moment. Tate Crispin in his uniform, brass buttons, the Grand Residencia entrance behind him. Louisa, he said. Louisa came out of the housekeeping alcove. You called Carmen. Yes, sir. How long were you watching before you called? About 20 minutes. Why didn't you call sooner? She looked at him. She was a small woman with the contained directness of someone who has learned to say precisely what she means, and nothing more. Because I wasn't sure you would want me to. You come unannounced. I thought maybe. She paused. I thought maybe you needed to see all of it first. Benny looked at her. 9 years, he said. 9 years, sir. 3 properties. Yes, he was quiet for a moment. You understood why I come unannounced. I understand why you come unannounced, she said. I wasn't going to take that from you before you were ready. It was, he thought, the most accurate description of what the anonymous note had also understood. Come as a guest. Not come and fix it. Come and see it. He had needed to see it. Even this. Especially this. Effective tonight, he said. I am asking you to take a new role. Guest Services Director for this property. Supervising the front desk, concierge, and bell staff, with a seat at the weekly operations meeting and a direct report line to Carmen. He looked at her steadily. It is not a reward for tonight. It is a recognition that you have been doing the work of this role informally for 9 years, and this company has not been paying you accordingly. Louisa looked at him. Then she looked at the photograph of Tate Crispin. She pressed her lips together in the specific way of a person who is not going to cry in the lobby, but is having a serious conversation with that intention. I'll do it right, she said. I know you will, Benny said. That's why I'm asking. What came after moved with the quiet precision of a man who had learned, over 23 years of building things, that the moment of exposure was not the point. The system that had allowed the exposure was the point. And the system was what needed to change. Carmen stayed at the Nob Hill property for a full week after the incident. She conducted the operational review she had been planning alongside a more specific audit. Every walk in denial in the past 14 months, cross-referenced against the system's availability log for the same date and time. What the audit found was a pattern that was not as stark as what had happened on a single night, but was present in the data in the way that patterns are always present in data when someone decides to look for them. A consistent gap between stated unavailability and actual availability, weighted toward late evening walk-ins presenting without luggage or visible markers of affluence. The audit report used careful language. It named a systemic failure in guest services culture and training, rather than attributing individual malice, where individual malice was not the full explanation. Most of what it documented was not cruelty. It was a set of habits that had never been tested, and therefore had never been corrected. Benny read the report in Phoenix and thought about Tate Crispin and the word invisible, and how invisibility is almost never the result of a single person deciding to make someone invisible. It is usually the result of many people deciding, separately and unremarkably, not to look. He called Carmen. "Every property," he said. "Availability read aloud protocol. Every walk-in, every request, the screen is turned to face the guest, and the current availability is read aloud before any other statement is made. It goes into the training module this week and into the operations manual this month. The Nob Hill staff are going to need support," Carmen said. This shook them. "Good. Something that doesn't shake you can't change you." He paused. "Schedule the town hall for next Thursday. I'll be there." He was there. He stood in the Nob Hill staff room on a Thursday afternoon with every employee who could be assembled. Housekeeping, front desk, bell staff, food and beverage, maintenance. And he told them the same story he had told the lobby on the night of the incident, in the same quiet voice. He told them about Tate Crispin. He told them about the brass buttons and the 31 years. He told them about the rule. He told them that the rule was not a management philosophy. It was not a brand value or a hospitality principle or anything that belonged to a PowerPoint presentation. It was something his father had said to him enough times that it had become part of his body, and he had built 17 hotels because he believed it was true, and everything that had happened in the lobby at 10 past 10 on a Tuesday night had been a test of whether the building he built believed it too. "You didn't know who I was," he said. "That was never the point. The point is that it shouldn't have mattered." He stood in front of the framed photograph of Tate Crispin. "This man was a bellman for 31 years, he said. "He is the reason this company exists, not because he was my father. Because he spent 31 years treating every guest with the same dignity, regardless of what they were wearing, regardless of whether they tipped, regardless of whether they ever came back. He did it because it was right. And then he passed that belief to me, and I passed it into every one of these buildings." He looked at the room. "When we fail it, we are not failing a standard. We are failing him. I need every person in this room to understand that." The room was quiet for a long moment after he finished. Then Dan Aquino, the youngest person in the room, sitting in the back row with his hands clasped, started to applaud, and the room followed. Benny did not ask them to stop. He let it go on for a moment because some things deserve to be acknowledged. Then he held up one hand. "Now," he said, "Luisa is going to talk to you about the new protocols. I will be here for the rest of the afternoon. If any of you have something to say to me, I am here to listen." He paused. That is also always true. Not just today. He found a chair in the corner and sat down, and Luisa stood at the front of the room, and the meeting continued. In the weeks that followed, the Nob Hill property ran the availability read aloud protocol from its first day of implementation, and the protocol spread to 3 other Estrella properties before the month was out, because Carmen sent a memo to all 17 general managers the morning after the town hall explaining the new standard and its origin. And the memo used language that was clear enough that every GM understood immediately what the standard was, and specific enough that no one could claim later not to have understood. The guest satisfaction scores at Nob Hill improved in the first 30-day window. Not by a dramatic margin, by the kind of margin that results from a room of people who have been reminded why they are doing what they are doing. Luisa Reyes moved into the guest services director role with the specific efficiency of someone who has been doing the job informally and is now simply doing it with the appropriate title and the appropriate authority. She restructured the front desk training to include a 2-hour module on availability protocols and a 1-hour module she wrote herself, which she called what this lobby is for. She required every new hire to stand in front of the framed photograph in the staff corridor on their first day and ask, "Who is this?" She told them. Then she told them why it was there. Then she told them to go to work. Dan Aquino completed his probationary period and was given a permanent position. He asked Luisa, in his third month as a confirmed employee, if he could add something to the Bellman station. She said, "What did you have in mind?" He said, "A small copy of the photograph, just for the station, so he could see it on shift." Luisa said yes. She told Benny about it on a call. Benny was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Make sure the lamination is good. The original fades if you don't take care of it." Marco Vidal completed his 90-day performance plan. His review was conducted by Luisa, who was now his direct supervisor. The review was thorough and honest and did not pretend that what had happened was not what it was. It also documented that Marco had spent his 90 days doing precisely what he had been asked to do and had not, in that period, made the same kind of judgment that had shaped his behavior on the night of the incident. His employment continued. He requested a transfer to the Estrella San Jose property 6 months later, which was granted, and the GM at San Jose told Carmen 3 months after that Marco was one of the most conscientious desk agents she had. Carmen told Benny. Benny said, "Good. That is what accountability is supposed to produce." The anonymous note was never definitively attributed. Benny did not try to find out who had written it. He had thought about it on the flight home from San Francisco, sitting in the window seat with his jacket folded on his lap and the laminated photograph in his breast pocket. And he had decided that whoever had written it had wanted him to see something important without wanting credit for it, and that this was a form of dignity he should respect. He thought it might have been Luisa. He thought it might have been someone in housekeeping who had watched the pattern for months and did not know any other way to act. He thought it might have been someone who was no longer at the property. He did not ask. He let it stay the thing it was, a person who believed the standard was worth protecting, doing the smallest possible honest thing to protect it, and trusting him to do the rest. On a Tuesday afternoon 3 months later, Benny came back to the Nob Hill property for a scheduled visit, on the calendar, in advance, as himself. He wore the same gray windbreaker. He carried the same duffel. He had decided, after the incident, that the gray windbreaker was the right thing to wear to every property visit, announced or not, because the standard should not change based on what the owner was wearing. He came through the revolving door at 2:30 in the afternoon. The desk agent, a new hire 6 weeks in, a young woman named Priya, who had not been at the property on the night of the incident, looked up and produced a warm, present smile that was not the right shape, and then the right shape, and then actually warm. The 3-step progression of someone still learning, but learning honestly. "Welcome to Estrella Nob Hill," she said. "Do you have a reservation with us, or can I check availability for you?" "No reservation," Benny said. "Of course." She turned the screen to face him. "We have 19 standard rooms available, 4 junior suites, and 1 accessible room. Would you like me to go through the options?" Benny looked at the screen. He looked at her. "A standard room is fine," he said. 2 nights. "Absolutely," she typed. "Can I get a name for the reservation?" "Estrella," he said. "Benedicto," she typed. She stopped. She looked up. "Mr. Estrella," she said. Something moved through her face, recognition, and then the decision of how to respond to recognition, and then the right decision. "Welcome back to Nob Hill. We're glad you're here." She said it the same way she would have said it if he had been anyone. Benny set his duffel down. He looked at the lobby, the warm light, the entry arrangement that had been freshened in the last day or two. The desk positioned so a guest coming through the door was greeted before they had taken 10 steps. He looked at the staff corridor entrance, where the framed photograph of Tate Crispin was visible from the lobby if you knew to look. He thought about 31 years of brass buttons. He thought about the man carrying your bag today might own the hotel tomorrow. He thought about what the rule actually meant, not the part about ownership, which had never been the point, but the part about always, which had always been the whole thing. He picked up his duffel. "Thank you," he said. Priya slid the keycard across the desk. He crossed the lobby. He stopped at the ceramic planter by the entrance. The arrangement was fresh, correctly maintained, the way it was supposed to be. He straightened one stem that had listed slightly. Small thing. His father's habit. He took the elevator up. In the lobby behind him, Priya reset the counter for the next guest. The warm light his father had inspired fell across the marble. Somewhere in the staff corridor, next to the time clock, Tate Crispin stood outside the Grand Residencia in the afternoon sun, holding his cap, wearing 31 years of dignity on his face. The door closed. The lobby did what the lobby was supposed to do. Before I end this story, I'd like to leave you with this. Tate Crispin spent 31 years carrying other people's bags. He held doors in the rain without an umbrella because the umbrella was for the guests. He called sir and ma'am to people who never once asked his name. He came home every evening smelling of other people's cigarettes, and he told his son the same thing so many times it became the texture of childhood. The man carrying your bag today might own the hotel tomorrow. Treat everyone the same. Always. He did not say this because he believed his son would own a hotel. He could not have imagined 17 hotels. He said it because it was true, regardless, because the man carrying the bag deserves to be treated well, whether or not he ever owns anything. Because the tired stranger at the midnight desk deserves a room, whether or not she turns out to be anyone important. Because the rule does not work as a strategy. It only works as a belief. Benedicto Estrella built 17 hotels on his father's belief. He visited them in a gray windbreaker at 10 at night. Because he understood that the only honest picture of a building is the one it shows when it thinks no one important is watching. And when the building he trusted most showed him a picture he did not recognize, he did not raise his voice. He sat in a chair with his father's photograph in his pocket, and he waited for the building to understand what it was supposed to be. The people who failed the standard that night were not unusual. They were ordinary people who had never been required to examine a habit that had never cost them anything. That is how most failures work. Not in cruelty, in the absence of a reason to look. So here is the reason. The tired stranger at your desk might be anyone. He might be nobody. He might be carrying a photograph of his father in his jacket pocket and a belief about dignity that is older than your hotel and more durable than your protocol. You will not know. And that is exactly the point. Treat them the same. Always. Not because they might own the building, because their journey is happening right now, in front of you, and it is asking you who you are. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in our next story.